Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Hawkesbury
Sorry,
Local...
just hold briefly. Yes, okay.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Hawkesbury Local Planning Panel meeting for 20th of October 2022. This panel has been appointed by the Minister for Planning and the Council to determine certain categories of development applications. My name is David Ryan. I'm the chairperson of the panel. And the other panelists with me today are Wayne Carter and Elizabeth Kincaid, who are state nominated representatives, and Paul Rogers, who's a community representative of the panel. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Darug people, their elders past and present. As courtesy to others, please keep your microphones on mute at all times unless I call upon you to speak. This meeting is being audio-visually recorded, and the audio recording will be via podcast on the Council's website. Any part of this meeting that has been held in closed session will not be recorded. In the terms of the Privacy and Personal Information Protection Act, personal information provided at the meeting will be recorded. The provision of any information that is recorded is voluntary. Any person who does not wish to be recorded should not address the panel. Under the panel's code of conduct, panel members are required to disclose any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest in relation to matters on today's agenda, and each of the panelists has just completed a disclosure form. I declare that I have no conflicts of interest in relation to today's agenda, and I ask each of the panel members whether they have any conflicts of interest to declare. Wayne?
I have no conflicts of interest to declare.
Elizabeth?
I have no conflicts of interest to declare.
And Paul?
No conflicts of interest to declare.
Thank you. On today's agenda, we have 3 items. Because we're online, the format we'll be adopting is that we will hear speakers who've registered on each of those items at the beginning of the public hearing. The panel will then, after having heard all speakers on all items, we will then retire to consider the matters raised in closed session. Thereafter, we'll return and there will be decisions made. That gives people the opportunity you can stay online if you wish, but I can't guarantee how long that process will be where we'll be away from the camera. So we will return to make the decision. You may, however, prefer to not stay online and wait to review the podcast. In relation to all the matters, the panel has read Council's assessment report and has read all written submissions. So please be aware that we can take it as read that the panel is familiar with the issues that have been raised. However, you do have the opportunity to present to the Council for 3 minutes. There will be a timer that you can probably see there that'll give you a guide as to how long that you are in that process. I do have the discretion there to extend that time, but please try to stick with that as much as possible. Because we have several speakers on the same matters, it's best to utilise your time by not necessarily repeating things that have already been said by a previous speaker. We'll take into account everyone's comments, and you can probably, the preference is for you to express any agreements that you have with previous speakers, but then deal with matters that may be new matters that haven't been raised in more detail. At the end of your submission, if you would please remain on line so that panel may have some questions for you. After we've heard from those speaking against the recommendation of the reports, we will then give the applicant's representatives an opportunity to speak as well and to answer any questions. I will now go to the first item, which is the first item on the agenda, but itemised as item 11, which is DA 0342/21, 95 Old Pitttown Road, Pitttown. I have a number of speakers registered. I will advise who I have registered to speak in the order that I have them in front of me. First speaker is Dennis Edgar. However, if when you put yourself off mute, Mr. Edgar, if you could just announce your name and address, and then commence your presentation for, let's say, 3 minutes. Sorry, it's Denise Edgar. I apologise for that, Ms. Edgar.
That's okay. Yes, my name is Denise Edgar. I did put in an objection to this DA. There's been 2 DAs on this property, and I note that the owner or the applicant has changed their DA again. Sorry.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I noticed that the applicant has changed the DA yet again. My concerns are, first of all, the flood evacuation route, and I totally support the position of the Pitttown Progress Association, their formal position, in that no further development in this area should take place until the flood evacuation route is fully upgraded over the complete length of the flood evacuation route. The last few floods that we've had have indicated or shown us just how poor the flood evacuation route is. So that's my first point, and I don't think that has been dealt with in the changes that have been made by the applicant. And the only other thing that I really am concerned about is the amenity of the current neighbours to this development. I don't think that even reducing the number of people to 76, I don't know how that number has been arrived, where that number has come from, but anyway, just reducing the number of people to 76 doesn't mean that the neighbours are not going to be severely impacted by this. And I don't think that we can't, I know that you can't say, okay, well, we can't make a determination based on what may happen in the future. However, the history of, the Sri Manda in Auburn shows that that's not the intention here. The intention is to have a lot more people attend. So what is going to be put in place? What safeguards are going to be put in place by council so that this doesn't happen here? So they're my 2 main concerns. There are others, but for the day, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Do any panelists have any questions for this evening? Thank you.
A question, Mr. Edgar. Whereabouts do you live in proximity to the development, Ms. Edgar?
I live on Cat Eye Road. My property goes from Cat Eye Road through to Airstrip Road.
I've got a map of the area. A kilometre, 100 metres. How far?
As the crow flies, probably between my place and the proposed development, maybe 200 metres, as 300 metres as the crow flies.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. You can put yourself back on mute now. Thank you. Jacqueline Taylor, I can see you're there. If you could take yourself off and mute and introduce yourself, please. 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Jackie Taylor. I live about 4 doors down from the proposed site, which is about 70 metres or so. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. I feel very disheartened about this whole process. I fear none of our many objections will have any bearing on the outcome of this application. The council has made clear its position and is bound by legislation restricting them from making sound common sense decisions in fear of being taken to the Land and Environment Court, like our neighbours in Glenhaven. Communication from the council has been sparse recently, not through lack of trying on our part, and I only received the notification for this planning panel meeting just yesterday. My family and I live close to the property of interest, and I'm speaking against the application because this temple will significantly change the enjoyment of, our quiet rural home. I understand this place of worship falls under permissible use of the site according to the archaic zoning legislation. However, I feel very strongly that once the temple is authorised to operate, it will eventually grow to such an extent that our sleepy neighbourhood will be changed forever. Unfortunately for the applicant, they submitted plans to council back in late 2019 as part of their first DA attempt, exposing their grand plans. We had a glimpse of a large 3-storey ornately decorated temple with the ability to accommodate many worshippers. Those original plans are now imprinted on all of us as a reminder of their end goal. The applicants were so excited about their new temple site that they have been advertising it on banners and newsletters within the Shremanda community, spruiking the benefits of a large parcel of land at Pitt-town. It would comprise a big new temple with a school, a library, a kitchen, and hold weddings, functions, and festivals, and cater to 1,500 people. We alerted council to this intended site use, included in attachment to item 11. This triggered the temple to amend their banners to ensure that they are seen not to be advertising plans, which, let's be honest, they'll probably eventually achieve, but are not supposed to make public just yet. Up until now, Hawkesbury Council was supporting its residents regarding this application and had demanded the applicant address a host of major items. The council did not support the application in early 2020 and again in 2022. However, lucky for the applicant, they have managed to secure the services of Mr. Stimpson, who has successfully navigated their approval for the largest Hindu temple at Kemps Creek. Mr. Stimpson has also demonstrated his excellent knowledge of adequately satisfying the council's requirements, at least on paper, with little regard for those who live near the site. The main reason for our objection is the potential for this site to increase exponentially, along with worshipper numbers, and the resulting impacts this will have on traffic, noise, and the condition of our already broken roads. Apparently, this application can only be assessed using information supplied in this DA and not looking forward at their true intentions. This is really disappointing. We bought our property to live a rural lifestyle away from neighbours, noise, and a pleasant bush outlook. The temple operates 365 days a year. Whilst it may only start with the magic number of 76 worshippers, that will soon grow, and I'd imagine another DA will arrive in my postbox soon enough with amendments to enlarge the temple footprint and increase the parking facilities. Why does it have to be nestled amongst rural residential properties in a quiet neighbourhood that rely on rainwater to feed their tanks and don't have sewer connected? Can't a more suitable site be chosen, for example, an industrial unit located in an area where traffic and noise would not even raise an eyebrow? And when the people attending the temple when the people attending the temple have no room to park in the 20 spots provided, and they have to park along the crumbled edge of the pothole-scarred old Pitt-town road, who do we call to complain? The compliance officer, as I was advised. They will come out and ask what's going on and politely ask them not to do it again. What a great deterrent. For these reasons, I do not support this application. Thank you.
Panelists, any questions?
No questions.
Just a question of clarification, I may, Mr. Chair. Ms. Taylor, you'd made mention you saw the words or the numbers 1,500. Can you just what was that again? I just was taking a note. Was that a suggested number of adherents, or what was that about?
That was not included in their original DA, but we managed to go onto the Shemandis site and noticed a banner behind the altar, and it was advertising. We've got a copy of it. It should be in the appendix. It clearly said 1,000 can cater to 1,500 people. It was on a banner advertising. It was also on a newsletter that was distributed to the members of Shemandi.
And that was related to the Pitt-Town proposal, or the
Correct.
Auburn proposal, or some other proposal?
No, the Pitt-Town, brand new temple at Pitt-Town, with all of what it will hold: a school, a kitchen, a library, yoga centre. Can cater to weddings, functions, can cater up to 1,500 people.
All right. And does council have a copy of that? Have you made that available?
Yes, we've sent that to council. We've sent that. Apparently, we've been told they can't take into consideration things that were not physically in the DA. But we believe that is their true intention, given the size of the site, and also, sorry.
Yes. Thank you for that. You've answered my question. I appreciate that.
That's okay.
Thanks, Mr. You could put yourself back on here.
Yep.
Yeah. The next registered speaker I have is Kane James Zammit. Is Mr. Zammit there?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. He was there. I saw him earlier, but I don't know where he's disappeared to.
I can see that if Mr. Zammit's not there at the moment, I will come back to him. I can see that we have Marie Atkins here. Ms. Atkins, would you like to introduce yourself? And you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name's Marie Atkins. I'm an accountant in the local area. I've lived here since 1995 and I've raised my children here, and I still run my business here in the Hawkesbury. I currently live in Oak Street in Pitt-Town in the village. We've seen massive changes since purchasing our dream acreage, and we understand that nothing stays the same forever. My children used to be safe to cross Saunders and Pitt-Town roads alone to catch public transport to school, and the increase in traffic in that area alone contributed to our decision to move. During the time we lived in Oakville and now Pitt-Town, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of vehicles in the area, a huge increase in population and development, but little to no change in infrastructure. The property that's being considered for this development on Old Pitt-Town Road is accessed by single lane roads in all directions: Old Pitt-Town Road, Stockroot Road, Pitt-Town Road and Airstrip Road. All of these roads have no lighting, some have no centre lane, none have curb and guttering, and all are in a state of disrepair. Trees and grasses are growing right up to the road's edge, making visibility poor. And I think Jackie mentioned parking along the side of the road. Well, that's just not a possibility. And as Denise mentioned, this development lies along our flood evacuation route. Our area is well known for the number of transport businesses that are locally based, and there are already a huge number of heavy vehicles on these roads. So vehicles on this route are currently competing for space against trucks, deer and potholes. For the safety of our existing residents and for the safety of any attendees to this proposed meeting place, no decision should be made on development or increase in either population or visitors to the area until our roads are safe. Back when Linwood was proposed, we raised our concerns about traffic at the intersection of Saunders and Pitt-Town Road and light and noise that would result from that approval. And we were told council would consider a roundabout at that intersection and would ensure that light and noise would not affect the neighbours. That was 2009. And the intersection there, while it has been widened very recently, has caused more confusion than safety. The DA then did not address our concerns as neighbours, and the development was passed, the massive neon sign added later and approved by private certifier, with council taking no responsibility. I'm afraid that this development will follow the same path. We can't really afford any extra traffic on these already busy roads. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Miss. Panelists, any questions from yourself?
Yes, I have a question of Mr. Atkins. Thank you very much for coming along. Could you clarify that you live in Oak Street? How far is that from the site?
It's probably about I don't know, maybe 4 to 6 kilometres. So noise isn't going to be a concern for us. The concern for us is that the road and the evacuation route runs right past this proposal. And the road is ridiculous in the mornings anyway for people going to work. So I just don't think that road can cope with the extra traffic. It's the way it is at the moment, people are driving down the centre of the road to avoid the potholes. And I know the potholes aren't going to be there forever, but they've been there for 3 years now with nothing.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Atkins. You made mention of a word, Linwood. As a local, I know what you're talking about. Perhaps for the panel, could you just expand what is Linwood?
So Linwood is a golf club. Where I was living before, it was what Jackie had said. It was a nice little rural country area. There were no street lights. There were no industry, well, no heavy industry. We had, a couple of poultry farms around us, and that was about it. And Linwood was proposed back in 2009 as a small golf club, and we were concerned at the time that it would impact our enjoyment of our own property. And council, I went to a council meeting at that time, and council addressed it, and they were, what they told us was good. We'll put a roundabout in, we'll make sure that it doesn't impact traffic. It will probably close at about 9 p.m. And on the whole, that has been the case. But that intersection there is just bedlam. It's there's been, I think, 2 fatalities on that intersection recently, I think. Correct me, I could be wrong. And I'm just sort of concerned that this development, being a meeting place, a place for people to gather and enjoy themselves, is going to follow the same path as the golf club, that it's constant traffic day and night, that there's occasional music, fireworks, that massive neon sign which used to shine in our bedroom windows, which is why we left there. All of these, and that was added after. So how can we guarantee that these things aren't going to happen with this development as well?
Thank you for that. Thank you. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Atkins. You can put yourself on mute now. And I believe now we have Kane Zammit. Mr. Zammit, would you like to take yourself off mute and introduce yourself? You have 3 minutes to present to the panel. Mr. Zammit.
So I'm having a bit of technical issues at the moment. I've only just got back in the meeting, so unfortunately I missed a bit of it.
So you're in your car, so that's fine. We can hear you if you can hear us.
Yep, I can hear you now. So I've only just got back in the meeting, so unfortunately I've missed a bit of the start of it. Just a couple of issues I have is mainly I see that there's now a 2.1 fence that's going to go around, say, the shed or the temple, as it's called. I don't believe that will be adequate enough for a soundproofing of the venue, being how many days they're planning on actually running for. Issue being, I sleep upstairs with a 1-year-old daughter. And I believe the noise is going to come straight through my window, as my bedroom window actually fronts to that property. So that's one of our main concerns. I'd like to know if they are actually planning on doing soundproofing inside the venue to actually stop any noise from coming outside of the temple itself. Loitering in car parks. Obviously, our roads that are set up are not adequate for the amount of traffic that may be looking now to come in and out. The corner of my road is already a dangerous blind spot. I feel if we have an overflow of cars that are parking actually on the side of the street, I'll have zero or very, very limited visibility trying to get out of my property. There's noise. I noticed there's looking to do 15 people, which is Monday to Friday. I don't believe that those numbers will actually be adhered to, and big concern will be, who do we contact for compliance on them breaching, say, the 15 people? So is there going to be like a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week number that we can contact that council organises, or is this a matter then that falls to the already overexerted police force? So I know they need to follow the DA, but whether that actually happens, where it goes to from there. I've got young children that play in the yard. I don't want a lot of strangers being able to see my children ranging from 1-year-old up to 11-year-old playing in my backyard. This is the main reason why we moved into a rural property setting. It's just, yeah, it seems very overwhelming at the moment. We purchased property February last year, and had I known that there was a DA that was coming in the process, there is no way in the world I would have purchased it. I paid top dollar for this property for its privacy, and now I feel I'm going to be forced to have to sell it. If this gets approved, I'll be looking at selling, but my issue then is how much has my property then devalued because of this? It's already looking to be devalued because of the current interest rates. If we're now putting right next to, say, a mosque, unless you are of the same, I won't say cultural, but religious belief, I don't believe my property is going to be of interest to you, because it's now going away from the actual setting that it was first purchased for. They're my main concerns. So yeah, the biggest one is the fencing. I don't believe that's going to be anywhere near adequate for it. So yeah, everything else is in already my objection letter.
Thanks, Mr. Zammit. Could you just say which property are you? Are you the property on the other side of that proposed acoustic fence?
Yeah, I'm 549 Old Stock Route, so I'm directly at the back of their property.
Thanks very much. Panelists, any questions, Mr. Zammit?
No, that's it for now. The other issue we had is I only just received this letter in the mail on Tuesday, which was nowhere near enough time for me to actually put anything together. I run my own company, so I've had to take time away from my own meetings to now deal with this on short notice. That's probably the only other concern I had. It just wasn't enough time to really prepare a proper speech for you for today.
No, that's fine. Okay, thanks. Sorry, that was my question to other panelists, whether they had any questions for you, but I don't.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. I don't believe there were. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Zammit. If you could put yourself on mute again.
No, thank you. Thanks for listening.
I have one written submission from Kelly Cook, and that will be read out by Council's Strategic Planning Manager, Mr. Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, written submission from Kelly Cook, who's speaking against the recommendation. I strongly object to the DA application for 95 Old Pitttown Road, Pitttown. I apologise for the haphazard nature of my objection letter, as received no response to my previous objection and have 5 minutes to notice to write such letter. Reasons for my objections are as follows. Old Pitttown Road is failing heavily. The Minister for Planning, Minister for Roads, New South Wales have formally confirmed that there will be no funding available in order to upgrade this route in the near future. And there's reference to a letter in the material that panel members have in that respect with that letter. The proposed development of this site will certainly increase traffic use of this roadway. The submitted DA proposes that the venue caters for a large number of worshippers and guests on a regular basis. A lack of local public transport requires attendees to travel by private transport. This road requires major upgrades in order to meet the demand of any further increase in traffic as a result of this development. This does not even include the damage and wear that will happen to the only evacuation route for Pitttown residents in flood, even if there is not added traffic in such times. Pitttown is a historic Macquarie town with a rural aesthetic and many historic sites. The proposed design of the venue in this DA is out of character for the Pitttown area. It does not embody the rural or historic values of the area, and the domes set atop the venue will be an eyesore. Rural areas are generally quiet in nature, which is the case in Pitttown. A large venue where many guests congregate will contribute significant noise pollution. As a result, causing disturbance to local residents who live in rural areas of Pitttown to enjoy the peace and serene lifestyle. We believe this venue will cause disturbance. large venue set on the boundary or fringe of such an important area of protected biodiversity that is Skyville National Park will most certainly have a detrimental impact. Pollution, noise, disturbance to wildlife, etc. Thank you.
That's is all of the registered speakers against the recommendation. I have registered 2 representatives who are speaking in favour of the recommendation. So Jeff Ferris-Smith and Warwick Stimpson. Do I have either of those gentlemen here? And if so, could you take yourself off mute and make yourself known to the panel? Council staff, are we aware that the applicant's representatives are here?
Yes, both Mr. Ferris-Simpson and Ferris-Smith and Mr. Stimpson are in the meeting, so we're able to hand over to them now. Yeah.
Warwick, your mic's off. Yeah.
Mr. Stimpson, are you speaking first?
Yeah, straight into it, are we?
Yes. Were you online to hear the speakers against the recommendation?
Say that again, sorry, Chair.
Were you able to hear the speakers against the recommendation?
No, I've literally just been brought in on the meeting right now.
Oh, okay. So I apologise for that then. It would have been helpful if you had been let in a little bit earlier so you could have heard what the speakers had to say and address them.
Look, I think
you understand what the main concerns were, and if you could, as part of anything else that you wish to present to the council, if you could address some of the key issues. So just for your information, some of the issues that were raised by the speakers before you related to the traffic and road unsuitability of the road, given its flood evacuation route status, concerns about amenity of neighbours, and particularly the adjoining neighbour was concerned about the noise that could be emanated from it, privacy issues, potential soundproofing of the inside of the venue. There's particular concerns raised about the future intentions of the operator here as to what might be planned for the future, but not part of this development application. But to say there are other matters that you would have seen raised in submissions, written submissions that if you would like to address.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, in general, we obviously support the recommendation, and we think that the report speaks for itself. This application is obviously a redesign of a previous application and is of a scale that is far more appropriate for the site and its locality. It utilises existing structures on the site and also includes aspects that potentially will mitigate any of the potential impacts that come out of it. Speaking to some of the specific things you raised, David, in terms of its general use, we have a population that will not be there all the time. There's a peak usage on a Sunday afternoon of up to a maximum number of people. Throughout the rest of the week, it's I think 15 to 20 people as a maximum. So I think that speaks to broader issues, traffic and potentially flooding, and I think that's what you said before, matters like evacuation, etc. In terms of amenity of neighbours, and particularly the adjoining neighbour, We have, as you'd be aware in the report, included a fairly substantial acoustic barrier that is set back from the boundary some distance, 2.6 metres from memory, which gives two things. Obviously, plenty of opportunity for some dense landscaping in there, which we have increased since lodging the DA, and also the retention of rural style fencing in between the two properties, which is a good outcome driven by council. Soundproofing, I believe we've addressed most of that in the acoustic report, etc. So I don't have anything further to add on that. In terms of future intentions, the way this community is looking at this site, given that one is that they will.
All right, Mr. Simpson, where you're frozen. Can you hear?
Organisations, and it seems to me that their approach to places of worship are just how I've described.
Sorry, Mr. Simpson, we just lost you for a little while. Could you rewind about 20 seconds to what you were saying?
Sure. The approach by the Hindu organisations that we support and assist, their approach is to look for outlets. So in terms of potential increase of populations or congregations, I should say, their intention is not to increase it on what we're seeking approval for now. They'll go and seek a site in Western Sydney somewhere else. So I think in general, I don't know if Jeff's much to add. He's the architect of the project, but we obviously, support the recommendation and hope that the panel sees that too.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. I'd like to hear from Jeff Smith. Did you have anything to add? You're on mute still. Could you just introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Jeff Smith. I'm the registered architect for the project. Both Warwick and I inherited this project, we'll call it that way, weren't involved with the previous one. And so that gave us the ability to advise our client on what we thought was approvable. Again, because I think we're all aware that there was a very large structure previously. So that's the nature on which we've done this. And again, I concur with what Warwick said. Every communication from us with our client is that they've heard the community, and that the scale of what was proposed before was not accepted. And again, this is their genuine attempt to meet their needs. And again, I believe that they have that realization also that in a longer term, they're going to have to look for a different site if they want something of a more substantial nature. And the only other comment that I would want to make is that we utilise that existing building just as it was the right size, and it's just a basic frame for us. But acoustically, that can be as soundproof as is required by condition of consent. The walls and everything, that can all be essentially contain sound within inside, and then we've got just the doors. And as Warwick said, there's acoustic report speaking to that. So just wanted to say that inherently there's no reason that the building wouldn't be and can't be modified to create a high level of sound attenuation. Yeah, so that was all I had to add.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Can I just clarify there? So the application proposes an acoustic wall outside the property near the boundary.
Correct.
Your suggestion is, I don't want to verbally give it, that you would also be in addition to that.
Yep.
There would be no objection to having acoustic treatment of the building itself.
Not at all. Again, working in this space for Christian churches and Hindu organisations, always the big assembly halls are an issue and a point of conjecture, even with the Christian churches, because they're quite loud these days. And yeah, we always have to meet the NCC and the building code with acoustics. But again, I wouldn't be adverse to there being conditions of consent that say it's got to achieve a certain acoustic attenuation with the building. That's very common with assembly halls of this nature.
Okay.
And can be readily accommodated here. It's just a steel framed building, so there's plenty of opportunity inwardly in the frame itself and then on the outside skin to attenuate that sound.
Thanks, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you.
If you could stay online while I ask panelists whether they have any questions. Mr. Rogers, did you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Stimson, can you just clarify again? Mr. Ferris-Smith indicated he was the architect. Your role here, you're the applicant, or what?
Yes, I'm the applicant and the town planning consultant for the project.
Right. So I wanted to take you, the plan, the report that we have has 12 annual special events noted on page 7, first paragraph there. I want to take you to a publication that I received from the Australian Hindu Cultural Association that identifies 9 specific religious festivals and days of significance. And in particular, as indicated, there's one usually every month, and it's related to the lunar calendar as part of the observance. But in particular, in March, there's a festival called the Maha Shivaratri, which is a whole night vigil. So I imagine that's a 24-hour night vigil. And then in September, October, there's a vigil. There's a festival called the Navarathri, which is a 10-day festival. And then in October, November, there's the Diwali festival, which is the very famous Festival of Lights, which is a 2-day festival. So it doesn't take too much to look at those suggested 12 annual events. Will be extrapolated with an additional whole night vigil, a 10-day festival, and a 2-day festival. And would you agree with that? That there are additional festivals associated with the particular faith? Would you agree with that?
No. This would be the best way to describe the Hindu religion is that Hindu is the umbrella, but within that umbrella, there are a number of specific parts of the Hindu religion. So not all of those religions apply to every single Hindu organisation. I take your point, though, that what you're suggesting is that there potentially more or maybe some more information could be provided around those that they're seeking. You've identified Diwali, or that is one that I think from memory is common across all of the Hindu religions. But no, I don't agree with how you've put it, but accept that maybe the client can provide some more details for you to give a proper response to that question.
All right, thank you. And perhaps that can be provided to council. As I say, that I am reading from a particular document. One of the concerns that I have, if I may, Chair, following on from that, the suggestion is if you're looking at a whole night vigil and a 10-day festival in September, October, and a 2-day festival with Diwali in November, there's no provision in this proposal for food preparation on site. Now, I would put it to you that the provision of the not having food and not having a kitchen effectively does not take into account the specific needs of the young, the very young. It also doesn't take into needs of the specific of those who would be regarded as disabled or differently abled, and certainly doesn't take into account the necessities to assist the elderly in terms of food and sustenance, a cup of tea, hot water, a cool drink, something to eat, etc. And so I'm particularly concerned that there's no provision at this stage within the structure for what I would call broadly a kitchen, to assist and facilitate sustenance for the 76 persons that have been identified. Why is there such a shortcoming?
Jeff might be able to speak to the specifics of the internal layout, but what I would contribute is that, again, many Hindu organisations will prepare their food and, refreshments, if you like, for the day, at their own homes and bring them in. We do have a kitchen, albeit a residential one, that is associated, like obviously within the dwelling that's there at the moment. So I don't believe that there's nothing there to cater for, the congregation. Jeff, do you have anything to add about the design brief from the client?
Yes, if I could just add also to what Warwick was saying, or your cultural question, Paul. I'm privileged enough to have worked with several Hindu organisations doing mandirs and temples. And I guess to add to what Warwick was saying, each one of those, Diwali is the only the commonality that I've discovered with them. And so again, just like there's different denominations within Christian faith, this brand of Hindu has nothing to do with the BAPAS organisation, which is another one, and a third one that I'm doing. And I actually get to go to all of their cultural events. And other than having an overlying Hindu faith, their celebrations, other than Diwali, are very disparate. So I would suggest that the best approach would be clarifying what this organisation celebrates and when, as I've never been heard or had any details of overnight or even extended celebrations from this organisation. So I guess I just wanted to speak to that and say that very much as an architect and someone who's not of the Hindu faith that comes in and asks a lot of questions about these things to my clients, and not assuming that there's a commonality between them all. For example, this denomination, men and women are treated, not treated, I shouldn't say that, I suppose, both in the same place at the same time. Another Hindu organisation that Warwick and I are working for is there's full separation of men and women at every stage, including eating and drinking. So and worship, they're separated. So again, people would think that's a fundamental difference, and it is. So let's speak to that. And again, my observation was that again, as Warwick said, the organisations that I deal with, the communities will often, they work as a community, they make their food and their drink, and they'll bring it and then serve it from side tables, and they'll have their water jugs that they'll put on. And again, for this number of people, the client was wanting to have the kitchen in the domestic building. There's obviously water in this location, and again, that's something that I'd be happy to add, drinking fountains or wash hand basins if that's appropriate. But yes, when it comes to the serving of food, that's brought on each occasion from the community. It's very community based at this scale, particularly just with the 70 or so people. I hope that helps.
I was seeking to clarify that none of us are in the business of speculation. This is all about a matter of application and council's consideration of any reports that are made available. And certainly I think it would be a minimum of an expectation that we should have details of the various religious festivals that this particular sect within the Hindu faith would be undertaking, because the document I'm reading to and referring to is one put out by the Australian Hindu Association that particularises 9 which are common, and I've identified 2, 3 that are particular of more than a 1-day duration. So I think we need to just lift our game a little bit to actually find out specifically what this applicant proposes at this site. And also, even if the food and drinks are all brought on, certainly proper food handling expectations in a public place would warrant the necessity for washing up and refrigeration and or reheating. So I think there needs to be a little bit more done than simply saying that there's a domestic dwelling with the caretaker, but I'm assuming that Mr. Simpson, you're referring to that, so that we have the domestic dwelling of the caretaker providing the cooking and refrigeration and heating. So I think that needs to be taken on board by both council and you as the applicant. So I would commend that to you, that it's an unresolved matter insofar as I'm concerned, and it needs to be better attended to. Would you see that, Mr. Ferris-Smith? Do you think you could work with council to get that sorted?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're all valid points. No objection from Warwick or myself with that. Yep. Again, obviously, we're trying to have an appropriate development and also make sure that it doesn't get bigger and out of control. But I think that there's certainly the ability to add a appropriate kitchen support facilities. Even though the intent, I want to make clear, is that there's no cooking or food preparation intended on the site.
Mm. And a final question, if I may, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, you may or may not have heard that one of the members of the community made reference to an earlier plan. I just wanted your thoughts. Made reference to a banner that had 1,500 as an anticipated number of people being on this particular site. Now, it's true that that particular application is not being proceeded with, but what can you tell the community in relation to the issue of 1,500? What does that reference historically mean, and does it have any significance to this proposal?
Sorry, the link actually dropped out when you said 1,500 the first time. So sorry, you'll have to repeat that question.
Right. Mr. Ferris-Smith, did you get the question?
Yes, I did.
Perhaps you can answer it. That will help, Mr. Simpson.
I'll just repeat what I believe the question was, and that was associated with the previous application where it was a banner that indicated, you know, probably celebrating 1,500 people will come to this site when this is approved. Paul is asking how does that relate to this, or what our comments would be. And certainly, as I said, we weren't associated with the previous application, but what I do know is I've never discussed anything with the client. Like, I've never had the client indicate a festival or that number of people being on the site. We've pushed and asked about maximum number of people, and the client has been has indicated that they understand and intend to stick to the numbers that are approved for. So again, and you know, my job's to also read them, make sure they're not trying to just tell me what I want to hear, but never have I heard an indication of those sort of numbers with this application.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Ferris-Smith. Anything further on that, Mr. Stimson? Can you add to that?
No, I agree. As Jeff said, we inherited it, and our advice to the organisation was that the first DA was significantly represented a significant overdevelopment of the site. And we started with first principles when we came on board to try and meet the objectives of the zone, minimise the impacts on the locality, and create a development that would work for the organisation, which is of course a permissible land use. So.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Simpson. Yes, nothing further, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rogers. If I could just, before heading over to the others panelists, could I just confirm the application before us and the conditions of consent indicate that there would be a maximum of 12 events per year, and those events are indicated to only operate between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. of a 2-hour period. There is no indication of any overnight activities that would be against the terms of any condition issued. and that the maximum numbers are, as part of this application, are 76. And any variation to that, anything over that, would be in contravention of the conditions of consent. So from the perspective of the general public, that is what, if the panel is minded to approve this application, or as recommended by the council, those would be the limitations that would apply. There are concerns about future intentions, and from the panel's perspective, whilst those concerns are understood, you've heard what the applicant's representatives had to say about those, but if there was any desire by the applicant to wish to expand the operation beyond what I've just described, that would have to be subject to another development application. So that's more for clarity rather than anything else. Ms. Kincaid, do you have any questions of action?
I just I had one question just to confirm in my mind, really. The rear of the property, so behind the 2.1 metre acoustic fence, that will not be used, like that's shown as restricted site area and no public access. So that won't be used by any of the members of the church, and I mean the temple, although will be part of any sort of bushfire management requirement.
Indeed.
Is that correct?
Indeed.
Okay.
Yep, that's your assessment's absolutely correct.
Yeah. Mr. Carter?
I had two questions about the impacts on the neighbouring properties. One was about the nature and design of the acoustic fence, and the other is about how to prevent the impact of headlights on the adjoining property when people are leaving the site at night. Now, the applicant could respond to those, or we can leave that to conditions of consent if the panel is of a mind to consent to the application.
Okay. Again, we were in discussions, I believe, with the council. Warwick, you could correct me if I'm wrong. It was decided that in terms of rural character, the fence would be a timber fence, and that the it's got an RW rating of 25 as sound attenuation. So that's the detail that is being provided in the report, is that again, it's to be of a rural character and achieve those levels of attenuation. And then with car parking, again, I think, did I misunderstand it? Sorry, Chair, Mr. Chair, did you say that the hours are restricted to 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. or was that just the special events?
That was just a special event.
Okay. All right. And so, yes, I mean, I would imagine, Warwick, it would be the same at this time. We'd be happy to receive conditions of consent if that's deemed appropriate by the committee.
Yeah, there'd be no objection.
No further questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
I don't have any further questions. Council staff, was there anything that you wish to comment on or add before I close this up?
No, nothing further. No.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you everyone who's presented on this item. As indicated at the beginning, we will deliberate on that after we've heard speakers on the next two items. But certainly can, when the meeting returns to open panel meeting, you can observe online, and the minutes of the panel decision will be made public within the next week. So thank you again. That closes this item. Now open to the next item. Those who are here, this is a public meeting, so you're welcome to stay, but it is obviously a different item, so you're also welcome to leave.
Okay, thank you for your time and consideration of the application. Good. It's all appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so the second item today's agenda is it's noted as item 12 is DA 0. Sorry, I'll just pause and wait until everyone who's attending the second item is allowed in. And council staff, could you ensure that that all speakers, including those 4, are let in from the beginning, please? So, council staff, we have everyone?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay, so item 12 is DA 080, sorry, DA 0308, stroke 21, 18 Lieutenant Bowen Road, Bowen Mountain. I have several speakers speaking against the recommendation registered. For those who weren't in the meeting at the beginning, I will announce those who have registered to speak in the order I have them. I'll ask that you provide your comments within 3 minutes. There's a 3-minute time limit. I ask you to observe that, but I do have discretion if you need to ask me to extend your period of speaking. Because I have a number of speakers, I'd suggest that if rather than repeating something you may have heard from previous speaker, if you just indicate your agreement with what has been said and then maybe move to points that haven't been ventilated by previous speakers. Once I announce your name, if you could just unmute yourselves, introduce yourself and where your address, and say restrict your speech to 3 minutes. The first person registered I have is Sarah Kasim. I can see you're online there, Kasim. If you could, you have unmuted yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for hearing our point of view here in Bowen Mountain, because it has been quite a disappointing process, like we heard with the Pitt Town residents. I still haven't actually received formal communications from the council about this panel. Only reason why I'm here is because I had spoken to another resident who received a correspondence. So it has been a disappointing experience, but needless to say, I'm happy to be able to share a little bit more about why this is such a terrible idea to put this in this location. So firstly, the proximity of this tower is in an RU5 zoning area is supposed to be roughly about 300 meters away from residents. Now the exemption is down to, it says 2.5 meters from a residence, from the south side boundary, which you would have seen in the actual report itself. However, on actually viewing the site, you'll actually see that it is not that distance at all. It is actually less distance from that house, which is at, they say in the report here, it's 4.5 meters. It is definitely not 4.5 meters. We're talking a meter. It's really not far at all. So I do question the discrepancies with the heights and the measurements that are actually in place within this report in itself. For instance, the existing antenna that is on the site, they've stated it as 18 meters on page 43, but then 20 meters on page 45. Now it's actually a 15-meter tower, so they're wrong in both of those pages, which is quite frustrating to read, because such a structure that's going to implicate so many different people in the street, you do want them to just get that right. Now, I've got so many things to say. Now, the flora and fauna, they have stated on page 41 and page 51 saying that there will be no modifications to the flora and fauna, which is meant to be masking that tower from being in place, whereas page 50 states that they're going to avoid it. Now, if you go forward into the council regulations and what they've recommended, they need to have a driveway in front of that. From here, it is the width of 4 meters. with heavy concrete, because there's going to be a lot of different infrastructure trucks that need to come in to help construct this this tower. Now, with that sort of concrete that's being put down, those trees have to go. There's no ifs or buts about that. The way that it is set out, and I don't know, I'm sure that there's photos there, they have to go, which then completely eradicates that whole premise that it will be hidden. It doesn't matter what color they paint it. It is unfortunately going to be very much an eyesore in this area. Now it's going to be sitting 8.5 meters past the tree lines. So how can you not see that, even with those trees in place? It says here also the minimal noise states that that there'll be only minimal noise from the air conditioners. Minimal noise still means noise, and it means it's going to be running 24/7. And when you have a neighbor on one side that's 2.5 meters that side, and then 4 meters on the other side, unfortunately that noise is probably going to be heard, and it's just not good enough, to be honest. They've completely dismissed the site E, which is the Crago Observatory. What I would say is that it's an economic cop out, to be honest, because we are actually the same topography as site A, but unfortunately what they've said here is that it's going to interfere with our other Optus networks. Now, there's no other towers around from Optus, so that actually doesn't make sense. Yeah. Yep. And also, can I just one other thing, and then I'll let everyone else talk. It's only a 3G and a 4G tower after all of this, all of this stuff has happened. And 3G, as anyone who's in the tech industry would know, is going to be phased out, middle to late 2024. So we have to take that into consideration as well. Why isn't it 5G if they're going to put anything up at all? I've got more, but I'll let other people talk. So, but thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Smith. Panel members, any questions for Ms. Smith?
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, Ms. Brooke.
Ms. Chasm, whereabouts do you live in proximity to the site?
I would be 8 meters away, so I'm directly opposite at number 15.
8 meters away, because I wanted to ask, though, the next question, your site-specific observations as to a meter as opposed to 4.5 was very specific. It's as if you've obviously been there, seen that, and made a sort of a rough measurement. Is that so?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
We literally look out over it, and we've had many community meetings at that site. The person who lives who could literally touch the tower, he has measured it as well as to where they're supposed to be putting the site compared to where his house actually is located.
Now, you've identified some perceived anomalies in the report, but you've also said the actual tower is 15 meters. How did you get that measurement? Where's that data from?
It has been in reports previously. I'll have to find them and pass them on to council if needed. But yeah, there has been discrepancies throughout the entire DA, to be honest. They even got the address wrong, so it wasn't very thought out in terms of how they actually put together the actual DA in itself, which just shows to us that it could be more so a economical, push to put it on a coexisting building rather than looking at other options which would be much better suited for what they require and what their development side of what they actually need. If they've only got 3G and they've got 4G, right, they're going to eventually have to upgrade that. And that's going to become an issue if it's so close up against these residential dwellings.
Well, I've got two more matters, and you've raised the issue. I think in the concluding, you said that you were an IT person, and to me, a mobile phone is something that I use. That's all I want to know about a mobile phone. So tell us, if you can, it's 3G, 4G now. You've said 3G is going to be phased out in 2024, and that 5G. What levels of additional radiation, what additional equipment
This is what I would also ask the applicant as well, to be honest, because I'm not an IT person, but I have looked into when these things are going to be obsolete. So I have run people like Telstra. I've spoken to other people in that field. However, what I would ask from the applicant is simply exactly what you're asking. I would like proper evidence as to why they're able to put a tower so close, not just saying, well, it's safe due to this. Well, let's actually explore that and give us the physical evidence as to why that's the case, in terms of that radiation that's actually being emitted. Because our street doesn't want to become a guinea pig. Just because we don't have the adequate studies in Australia doesn't mean that those studies aren't viable in other countries. And I think we need to take that into consideration as well in this case.
All right, thank you. Just the concluding question, if I may, Chair. You talked about tree removal at the point of access for trucks for any construction, etc. Now, I'm a little bit lost because we haven't had the opportunity for a site inspection. What sort of trees are you talking about? What sort of variety? What sort of height?
I think that there is pictures. I don't know the types of trees, to be honest.
Right.
But they. Let me just see if I've got.
The pictures I've got is an aerial view. It doesn't actually.
Okay. So if you've got, it's on page 47 of the report, and figure 6 on that. If you've got that handy, that's the size of the tree. So it's not going to cover much, to be honest.
So they are the trees. They would be the trees that you would suggest that need to be culled.
They will be the trees that there's no way that they would be able to survive.
Perhaps council might want to address that perhaps later. An observation from council as to those trees. Thank you for pointing those trees out. Thank you. Nothing further, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mr. Senator. If you could put yourself back on mute. I'll call on William Kerr. Let's see, there's William. If you could introduce yourself and your address. 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am a resident and ratepayer at 13 Red Gum Crescent, Bowen Mountain. My family and I wish to object to the proposal for the tower on the following grounds. Firstly, the radiation. The proposed site is far too close to existing residences, as we've seen previously. The plans indicate the tower will be about 15 meters from residents. We've just heard that it'll be much closer. According to the proposal, HLP 1989 states that if a facility does not emit less than 0.2 microwatts per centimeter squared radiation, it must be at least 300 meters from a residential dwelling. This documentation does not identify whether or not this minimum 0.2 microwatts per centimeter squared is met. It only states that there's no site where the 300 millimeter requirement can be met on Bowen Mountain. That's really no reason to start breaking zoning requirements. Also, we've talked about visual impact. The proposal notes to minimize visual impact, no tower may be constructed closer than 100 meters or 3 times the height of the tower, whichever is the greater, to any residential dwelling. And being so close to the nearest residences, the subject site is certainly located within 100 meters from the nearest dwelling. It should be noted that in the early 1990s, a similar proposal was put by Prospect Electricity. At that time, a helium balloon on a 33-meter line was used to demonstrate the height of the then proposed tower. The impact of this demonstration was such that the proposal was vetoed by council. There are even more houses today that would be affected than there were at that time. With respect to property values, in 2017, Rajapaksa et al. Documented in Australia that proximity to cell phone towers negatively affects house values. Placement of the facility in the proposed location would likely significantly reduce property values for many of the approximately 70 homes in the nearby vicinity, with the largest impact to be felt by those in the immediate proximity of the tower. While this might not be a concern under Section 4.15 of the Environmental Planning and Protection Act, as noted by the consultant, it is certainly a major concern for the approximately 70 homeowners, ratepayers, and council voters living in close proximity to the proposed tower. Also, other options to the proposed option A that was presented appear to have been too easily discounted by the consultant, who appeared, as has been previously said from the documentation, to simply choose the cheapest option for Optus by piggybacking onto the current Endeavour Energy site. Bowen Mountain has significant non-residential areas that have elevation and are not close to homes, which should be more carefully considered. Kurrajong Heights also has existing towers that could possibly be used instead. It is our opinion that these options have not been sufficiently investigated and may provide more successful outcomes for all stakeholders. And I'd ask you to please note that other objections were raised in our submission, but 3 minutes has not permitted their time for discussion here. So thank you very much for the opportunity to address the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Panelists, any questions of Mr. Kerr?
Yes, long-term resident up on the mountain. How far are you from the site itself?
We're about 300 meters from the site. We're in the street just east of Lieutenant Bowen Road.
Right, right. All right,
250 to 300 meters from the site.
Yes, yes. And thank you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. May I also ask, or just note that I'm also president of the Bowen Mountain Association, who has also submitted an objection to this proposal as well. But we weren't able to mandate me as the speaker for that organization in time for this meeting.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. You can put yourself back on mute, please. Could I ask Mr. Glenn Cassim to take yourself off mute and go 3 minutes?
Thank you very much. Mr. Kerr raised a lot of points that I was going to be raising myself, so I definitely agree with a lot of his points, as well as Mrs. Cassim as well also raised quite a fair few points. The actual site that has been incredibly easily dismissed is the same topographical height as the proposed site A. There's really no evidence at all as to why that facility can't be used. They've said that there's a possible interference, and that's pretty much how they've written that off. There's a possible interference with other existing Optus network. I don't know too much about the goings on of the towers, but I thought that in line of sight, tower between tower is probably the best form of method, and site E has that 100%. Also, with the property values, my property is directly opposite the actual site itself. Now, look, it does state in there that they don't have to consider any negative loss of property values. We've had several real estates from the area come out, and I've actually been a real estate agent myself. And they all adhere to around about a 30% loss in property value for our home, and other homes very, very close in the local vicinity. That's an absolute huge loss. We originally bought the place as it was a rural zoning. So we didn't ever think that something like this was going to be able to be put into a rural zoning. It doesn't meet any of the zoning requirements. Also, just in regards to the actual tower itself and the closest neighbour, like Mrs. Cassim said previously, we've all been there and done site inspections and those sorts of things. That gentleman has a second-story balcony, and his second-story balcony, whether he chooses to spend a lot of time out there or not, standing off that balcony, he's almost literally going to be able to put his hand on that tower. Now, I don't know in what area ever that should be allowed to have a structure built so close to a residential home like that. So I think that most of my points have been covered previously, and yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Cassim. I apologise for mispronounced both of them. Sarah's surname there. Any questions for Mr. Cass?
Not from me, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. West. You can put yourself back on mute, please. Now, I have other speakers registered. I noticed Mr. Dale Ryan on the call here. I did have you down for your submission to be read out. Do you wish to have the opportunity to make a presentation to the panel yourself? Mr. Ryan, Dale Ryan? So I can see Mr. Ryan, but he doesn't appear to be able to hear us, so I might revert to that as a written. So, Mr. Ryan, are you able to? I'm sorry, we can't hear you, Mr. Ryan. So I'll give you some time if you do wish to try and get yourself on the call to do so. If you can't, then Council's Strategic Planning Manager will read your submission for you. But I'll see how you go and come back to you. So, Mr. Kearns, there are a number of written representations that you'll be reading out to the panel.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first one is from Pauline Vizard, who's made some representations against the recommendation of the report. So no full and frank exposition of this project was given to Bowen Mountain Association or residents. Many residents did not know about it or cite the 51-page application, let alone have time to read it before the opposition closure dates. No development signage was placed on the front fence of the proposed site. Please refer to point 5.4 noise and vibration on page 40. There will be no noise or vibration impacts associated with the telecommunications tower. The equipment shelter will emit only minimal noise from the air conditioning units, which enable the equipment to stay within normal operating temperature. These air conditioners will run 24/7. And at the end of this paragraph, given the isolated location of the proposed equipment shelter in the context of the area, this site is a little over 15 metres wide. Further, in the second paragraph, as the proposed facility does not immediately adjoin any residential properties, there are residential properties opposite and on both sides of the site. One property about 4 metres to the fence line from the proposed pole and the other 11 metres from it, and clearly visible from both residents' living areas, as is the radiation area warning sign. The final sentence, additionally, the vast separation distance from the development site and the residents' land uses will negate any potential noise impacts generated during construction. What is the vast separation distance? Desktop plans look impressive, but an on-site visit quickly exposes the close proximity of the 33.5 metre monopole to the surrounding private dwellings. Young school children frequently play in front of this site as they wait for the school bus. Quarterly maintenance offered in a bushfire-prone area is totally inadequate, as is evidenced by the leaf litter build-up at the front and rear of the site, incorrectly described throughout the application as 18 Lieutenant Bowen Drive. Of extreme concern for the residents in this street is the electromagnetic radiation and its effects on medical devices. Do the same health and safety measures apply to all providers on the pole? How frequently are tests done? What about malfunctions after severe electrical storms? Mobile phone base stations shall be located in accordance with the following table. See location criteria. A minimum of 300 metres from any residential dwelling unless annual average exposure at any such premises is less than 0.2 UW per centimetre squared. What exactly does that mean? Finally, a few gum trees won't hide the 33.5 metre monopole or the visible radio frequency emissions from it. Thank you. The next representations was from Mr. Todd Kuhn, a resident of Bowen Mountain. The following is a written submission to voice my opinion against the recommendations for DA 0308/21. Firstly, I wish to make it clear that I believe Bowen Mountain does need better mobile phone coverage, but not at the risk to residents' health and well-being. I have made my objections clear previously regarding the so-called co-location and how I believe that it is in breach of numerous zoning laws. My property will be within 4.5 metres of the new monopole and the equipment shelter. And as I previously explained, New South Wales Telecommunications Facilities Guideline, Scheduled Facilities and Areas, Part 1, Section 3.1, Part 7, Item number 2F, states that the likely level of noise from the operation of the co-located facility are required to be less than or equal to the noise that resulted from the original facility. The noise levels will be in fact far greater than the existing facility due to the fact that 3 new air conditioning units will be installed and will be running constantly to regulate the temperature of the new infrastructure. The existing facility emits 0 decibels of noise due to the fact that there are no engines, generators, or air conditioning units of any kind currently at the site. So if the new facility emits even minimal noise, as stated by the applicant in Section 1, Reports for Determination Acoustics, then it is clearly in breach of the aforementioned clause. If this is true, then how can the DA be approved? Bowen Mountain is a small residential community that has very few structures which breach the tree line or have a negative visual impact on the area. Yet I believe the proposed monopole will not be hidden as per the applicant's suggestions and will be an invasive eyesore for the entire community and a blight on the pristine bush outlook we have all come to love and admire. I believe that the proposed DA applications needs to be rejected and an alternative site chosen for any future mobile tower. Thank you. Next one I will read is from Robert Blumenthal as speaking against the recommendation. I would like to have the following submission read at the Hawkesbury Local Planning Panel on Thursday, 20th of October 2022, considering the telecommunications facility at Bowen Mountain. The proposed location for the Optus Tower may be expedient for Optus, but it will and is causing a lot of angst for local community members, mainly in regard to the visual impact, its close proximity to residences and the possible impacts on lowering housing prices. There is a perfectly suitable alternative location for the tower on the Burralow Fire Trail near the Cargo Observatory. This may not be an expedient location for Optus, but it does solve the angst for the local community. Also, the residents living next to the current tower and infrastructure already put up with poor maintenance of the site, noise from air conditioning units, and possible radiation issues. This is not the site for a larger tower, being so close to residential homes, and Optus should find an alternative. Before I read Mr. Ryan's comments, I don't know if Mr. Ryan's we're able to hear Mr. Ryan or not before I read.
Send him a message to disconnect and then reconnect again.
It appears that Mr. Ryan's having difficulties there, so I think, Mr. Kennedy, if you could read this.
Okay. Yep.
Before I read Mr. Ryan's comments, I don't know if Mr. Ryan's we're able to hear Mr. Ryan or not before I read.
Can you hear me?
Right. We can hear you now. Good.
Oh, good.
Do you wish to make your presentation yourself?
Yes, I would. Thank you, if I could.
Yeah, please do. 3 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Ryan, can we just stop you there? Can we ask if there's any participants in the meeting that is watching this meeting on YouTube, that you remove yourself from the YouTube channel because it's creating a feedback in the audio.
Okay, hang on. Does that help? Hello?
No, you can still hear it. Just try and talk again there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better now.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So what I'd like to say, all the points I would have covered have been covered, except for one item where the applicant hasn't really addressed the New South Wales government guidelines for telecommunication installations, and which states, specific heights, distance from rural zoning boundaries, and I just cannot understand why they haven't addressed that. And in the council report as well, that government guideline for telecommunication installations hasn't been addressed. That's all I would like to add.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Panelists, any questions for Mr. Ryan? Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
If I may, Chair, Mr. Ryan, have you actually seen those guidelines yourself, or are you?
Yes, I've read the guidelines. I live 2 houses away from the particular site.
And that's another question I was going to ask of you. So you're 2
actually,
houses.
I'd like to back up Ms. Kazan's view with the construction. I'm a retired construction engineer, and there really isn't access available to carry out a proper construction on that site. There would have to be trees removed to do that efficiently.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ryan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If you could just mute yourself again, Mr. Ryan. Yep.
Thank you.
That is all the speakers registered to speak against the recommendation. I have registered Mr. Philip Hull, who's speaking in favour of the recommendation. Mr. Hull, I presume you're the representative of the applicant.
Yeah, good morning, Chair, panel members. Yeah, my name's Philip Hull. I'm a planning consultant. I'm working on this occasion for Optus. I think I've listened carefully to the, I've read all the written submissions. I've listened carefully to the verbal submissions today. I think most of, if not all of the points raised are actually covered in the officer's report. I don't really want to dwell at length on any of those points other than to say I'm quite happy to respond to any questions from the panel, or indeed try and respond on any of the points from the submissions if the panel would think that would help you in determining the application. There are a couple of points to stress, though, I think, which come out again and again. The first one is radiation exposure and EME and health. Now, we can understand, Optus understand, of course, there are concerns. However, I would point you to an extensive literature on this subject, both from our Panzer are referred to in the officer's report. Go onto their website and they have an extensive literature about EME and health. I won't go into their conclusions. You can find those for yourself. However, that is based on long-term studies of EME and health. And if our Panzer, which is an Australian organisation, is enough for you, go to the World Health Organization. So both of those organizations, independent of government and governments, have their own conclusions on that matter. So there's extensive research on that. The second point was to do, I think, with, I'll put together a couple of points. One was visual impact, and I think that's more than adequately covered in the officer's report, whereby, and I'll tie that together with the co-location of facilities. Now, rather than, if you look in the telecommunications guidance, including broadband on the New South Wales government website, there is guidance in terms of where you locate these facilities. Now, the green field is actually our last port of call. We're actually encouraged by the New South Wales government to try and co-locate facilities wherever possible. That means where there's an existing pole. I mean, for example, here, it could be an existing Telstra pole or a Vodafone pole, or there's the EE pole, or it could be the roof of a building. So rather than being in conflict with guidance, I think we're actually going with guidance on that matter. The visual impact, of course, there's something there already. We're replacing an existing pole. I think the point which hasn't come out too well, though, it's in the officer's report on public interest, is the increasing need for good telecommunications policies. I'm actually working from home. I'm lucky at home, I've got good broadband. So I'm actually on my laptop, and next to me is my mobile phone. What are we using mobile phones for? Decreasingly to make phone calls, increasingly to make our lives easier. and to enable people to do a whole range of facilities from their home, which they wouldn't previously been able to do. The last point on that, I'll just touch in the 3G, 4G, 5G. So yes, 3G will be going out. 4G, as you probably look on, as you're traveling around, when you've only got 3G on your mobile phone, you can't do very much. I've only got 4G on my mobile phone, and I can do a lot on my mobile phone with 4G. There will be 5G eventually, but 5G is a different animal. We're introducing 5G in urban areas. Into rural areas, there'll be quite a long time in coming. However, when we do get to 5G, all it means is we'll be replacing some of the existing antennas with new antennas. The criteria in guidance for that in terms of EM and health won't change. So when that point comes, if it comes to the point where we want to add 5G, we will also do a similar consultation exercise with local residents. They will be able to make their comments and we will respond at that time. There's plenty of, I don't know where everybody lives, in urban areas, there's quite a lot of 5G now. We still have to go through all the hoops in terms of location of facilities. I hope I'm within my 3 minutes, and I hope I've picked up all of the points that I think are pertinent to the determination of the application. Quite happy, sir, to answer any questions you or the other panel members have.
Thanks, Mr. Howell. I think it would be worthwhile, and the applicant generally aren't restricted to 3 minutes, in order that you have plenty of time to address things that have come up, been raised in representation. So, but if I could, before I pass on to my other panel members, a couple of things that were raised in presentation to us was that I'd like you to address. Firstly, the alternatives that were considered, and there was a concern expressed that some of the alternatives were too easily dismissed and weren't given adequate consideration. Another related to the construction impacts, the inevitable construction impacts said that, the construction impacts said to inevitably impact on the trees, whether that's been adequately addressed. And the other was compliance with New South Wales guidelines, particularly as they relate to distance from houses.
Okay, first of all, yeah, sorry, sir, yeah. Okay. I'll have a go. I haven't got all my notes to hand. I'm looking at the office report. Well, actually, 201. I'm not quite sure the guidance that Mr. Ryan referred to. The only guidance I'm aware of, obviously, we have to comply with the EPNA Act in terms of a development application. Telecommunications facilities as such do not have a zoning. By definition, we are always located in terms of a different zoning. That could be urban, it could be rural. That's a planning matter, which the officers have addressed in their report. I'm a bit at a loss to know what that guidance is, sir, that he's referring to. I've already referred to the guidance, which is on the New South Wales website, which is telecommunications facilities, including broadband. That's the only guidance I'm aware of.
I'll see if Mr. Ryan is still able to communicate, and if he is, if you could just unmute yourself, Mr. Ryan, and if you're able to provide any enlightenment on which guidelines you're referring to.
I was going to add, sir, if there is other guidance that I'm unaware of, and if Mr. Ryan makes it available to you, I'm quite happy to make further written submissions on that in due course, if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. We might leave it there. I'm not sure how Mr. Ryan's going with it.
Okay, well, the guidance, I've given you the guidance. It's government guidance. It was actually specifically brought out, oh, God knows how long ago, Bob Carr, a long time ago, really to kind of deal with this policy void, if you like, for telecommunications facilities.
Those guidelines came out in 2010.
2010, yeah, that's some time ago. They're robust. They haven't changed. Oh, sorry, they have changed very slightly recently in terms of the naming, but the guidance as far as telecommunications facilities have not changed. So I would just simply refer to the panel to that guidance and let you draw your own conclusions of whether we follow the guidance or not. I believe we do. The planning officer believes we does. I'm not sure what Mr. Ryan is talking about, whether there is any other guidance. I say I can quite happily respond to that in written form, should that be helpful.
Just I can say, Mr. Ryan, at least I can see him and he's unmuted. Are you able to speak, Mr. Ryan? If so, did you hear the question? Do you have
Yes.
any
Can you hear me?
guidelines you referred to?
Yes, can you hear me?
If we can hear you.
Oh, good. I think it's the same guidelines, 2010 New South Wales government, which states to replace an existing tower, you cannot go over the height of the existing tower. And within the rural zoning, which this community comes under, and a new tower cannot be constructed within 100 metres of the boundary of that zoning.
Thank you.
Can I help you? Sorry, I'll try and help you there, sir. I think Mr. Ryan is confusing the guidance where we actually are able in RU zonings to construct telecommunications facilities within defined parameters. Now, the distance matter is correct. If we were locating the facility in an RU rural zoning and we met the distance requirements, we're actually able to do that without the need for planning consent. On this occasion, that's not the case. So we needed to submit a development application to Hawkesbury City Council. If we were in a location, he is right, but if we were in a location where we were not requiring planning approval from council or from the panel, there are criteria laid down. Mr. Ryan is kind of got the criteria right, but those are only in circumstances where we don't need planning consent. I don't know if that helps you, sir, or if that deals with Mr. Ryan's concerns.
Yeah,
Well, what about
Mr. Ryan? I think we've got. We just want to come back to you on what guidelines you're referring to, and you've clarified that. So I don't want to open it up to a debate.
Okay.
Sorry, sir. I'm trying to take all your points down. That was one point. Can you just refresh the other points, please?
Yes.
The height.
Construction impacts on the.
Yes. Yeah. Now I've addressed the criteria which are necessary for the determination of a planning application within the DA and within the Statement of Environmental Effects. We will need a construction certificate in due course should the application be approved. These are normally planning conditions laid down by council in terms of control of these activities. I did quickly go through the planning conditions. That no doubt there are conditions there. I think you'll have to look to council reports, sir, and turn to council. I would say all of those matters are controlled by other legislation and by construction certificate and by planning conditions. I hope they're covered there. I haven't checked.
I think what's key and would be a consideration for the determination of this application is that if, as a result of construction, there is an inevitable need to remove some of the trees which have been identified as part of the justification for the visual impacts of the proposal. If they necessarily have to be removed in order to construct the tower, that's a consideration.
I understand the point, sir. I understand the point. There currently is an existing EE facility there. There are no doubt their traffic goes in and out. Construction of a telecommunications facility on this occasion would mean removal of the existing pole. Normally a low loader truck would reverse into the site. A hole has to be dug into the ground. They have to pour concrete into the ground. The kind of construction activities are fairly similar to any other kind of facility of that nature, be it electricity, be it telecommunications, be it fairly minor residential or commercial development. So there's nothing unusual in terms of the construction activity. In fact, our construction activity is quite limited in terms of the complexity of trades which normally take place in building sites. We don't have that kind of detail. So all of this, of course, must be inspected by either a council certifier or a private certifier at the time. If, sir, or you have concerns of that nature, I was wondering whether you would wish to put some form of a condition in of that nature, that should such impacts, whether there should be control of such impacts or whatever. I can't visualize in my head. I'm actually the planning consultant. I'm not the builder. I haven't got the builder with me today. We subcontract the building out. I can't really answer off the top of my head, no, but I can invite appropriate or suitable conditions or comments by yourselves as to how, if you think there's an issue there, how we could address it.
Mr. Allen, the last one of the matters recorded as being raised by the speakers was the consideration of the alternatives.
Oh, alternatives. One thing that's important about telecommunications facilities is I invite you, well, invite anybody. Hopefully, when people travel around, they get fairly continuous coverage in their mobile phone. What's actually happening with your mobile phone is it's picking up a signal from different base stations as you go around. That's how it works. You'll go into black spots. Now, if you actually, when you go out, that's quite interesting. When you go out and do your site visit to have your mobile phone, and you'll notice you're going to go into quite a lot of black spots where you'll get no mobile phone coverage at all. That's because there are no base stations nearby. The importance of a base station, it must be fairly close to where people live. It just simply doesn't work. The further you get away from them, the ability to get a signal recedes to the point where you don't have to get very far away before you get no signal at all. You can't put them somewhere else. You have to put them where people live. That's the whole point. Going back to the guidance, the first thing we have to look is, are there any other mobile base stations in the facility that we can co-locate on? The answer is no. There was one Telstra possibility, and that was down the hill. There are very few, if any, other alternative structures that we could locate. I've been to Burn Mountain on several occasions, sir, and when you go, you'll appreciate it, the rural nature of it. There aren't very many opportunities to co-locate. The officer's report deals with it, and a number of the speakers dealt with. This is a constrained rural location with many environmental constraints. We actually abut the national park, where telecommunications filters discouraged. There are a number of environmental planning constraints in the area. So we have to consider all of the environmental constraints before we find a suitable location. Hopefully just to finish on that point, and it ties with visual impact, the tower itself must be above the trees. It doesn't work otherwise. You can't just fire signals into trees, they don't work. So it must be just above the trees. Then ideally, the ideal location is right in the middle of Bow Mountain. It covers the maximum number of people. The more you move it away, the more towers you actually need to cover the area. Again, Burn Mountain, it's a strong community. We recognise that. It is a community. There's no doubt about that. It's a fairly isolated community. As you go up there, you'll notice that it's a community on its own. It's not an urban extension. It's a rural community. So there, I think I covered it I looked at all the alternative locations. We had discussions with various landowners. We discussed it with council, and the location we come up with obviously has to be a compromise against all of the environmental constraints, the physical constraints. Also, one last point I missed. The tower being above it, they have to talk to each other as well. It has to get radio transmission from another location. When you're there and you look across, you'll see quite a lot of tall towers on the hills opposite. So it needs to get a radio signal, first of all, from another tower. The Americans use the term cell net. It's a net of cells, and they have to communicate with each other. So hopefully, I think that's covered in the officer's report. And if there is any ambiguity or misunderstanding, I hope I've covered any outstanding points. But if you have any other concerns, please feel free, and I'll try and add to that if I can.
Thanks, Mr. Hull. I do have another couple of questions, but I'll have to throw it over to the other panelists if they have any questions first. Mr. Carter.
Yep. Thanks, Chair. My question is about alternative location on that site. And there was quite a bit made by some people about, some of the objectors about the fact that it's at the front of the site, the fact, therefore, it's reasonably close to the houses across the road, the fact that it's right next to the property on the immediate southern boundary. Some of that could be addressed if the tower was on the western end of the site, behind the existing building, behind the existing tower, and in about the centre of the site. Has that been considered as an alternative? Would it make much difference? And yeah, what are the reasons that the front of the site was chosen?
Yes, has been considered. I think, gentlemen, what you really will appreciate when you do the detailed site visit, the proximity of the existing EE tower, how close it is. There's a balcony out of the adjoining house which is looking straight at the existing tower. It is a small site. It is a constrained site. There's no doubt about that. We looked at swapping that out. We looked at swapping it out with the lattice tower. We looked at swapping out with the pole. And I'll go to your last point first, and I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. The site is still pretty well screened. I took a number of photos. I've submitted a few in the SCE. I've done some photo montages, which please go to the photo montage locations, and I hope I'm being fair. There may be others. The answer is I don't think it'll make much difference. Listening to the submissions received, wherever we put it, would receive objection. Wherever we put it, there will be somebody who's going to say it impacts upon me. So we dealt with detailed site investigation, and that was considered to be within the site. We're only talking about a few meters. I mean, it's a very small site. So with respect, I think, to the question as draw your own conclusion, I don't think it makes much difference, no.
Thank you.
Okay.
I had just a few questions. Is there the current site, is it currently supported by air conditioning units that operate 24/7? Do you know?
That I couldn't answer because it's not our site.
Yeah.
I guess it probably is. I don't know.
Okay.
Again, look, I can try and find out if you want, and I can put a further submission. I mean, again, I think you'll judge this from the site visit. Air conditioning, we all have air conditioning. Perhaps we shouldn't with global warming, but we do. There will be some air conditioning. We generally say the air conditioning is similar in terms of noise emissions to domestic air conditioning systems. Council will have considered this, and they will have looked at their own environmental health. It's a matter which is conditionable, of course. There are numerous of these facilities all over the place. It should not be any different in terms of noise impacts to an ordinary domestic dwelling. But again, that's up to council. If they have concerns, they can condition that.
Okay, similarly, I was interested about existing lighting on the existing tower. I'm not sure if you're across that, whether there's lights.
I think one of the issues that came up, as you probably appreciate, the extensive delay was consultation with RAAF at Richmond Air Base. I'm not sure whether there's an existing light on the tower. Again, I'd have to check that. I'm not really, sorry, I've not really looked at the existing tower. I'm looking just at the proposed facility.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay,
it's a fairly, if it is, I would need to look at the existing facility, need to look at the drawings. It's probably there in the drawings. Again, I think you'll be able to see it when you're on site.
I did go on site, but it wasn't of a night time, so I didn't.
Okay. No. Again, look, I can't answer you off the top of my head because I'm not responsible for the current facility. It's not an Optus facility.
That's okay.
Sorry, I can't help you any more on that. Sorry.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Hull, you'd be a proponent for universal coverage of telecommunications, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily, no.
Why not?
Well, universal coverage, the need for coverage has to be balanced between where people live and work and need it. Most people, well, I'm a town planner, so most people are encouraged to live and work in urban areas. There are rural communities. We should not. So
there's a cost associated.
There is a cost associated. The federal government have a program of black spots to provide coverage. We do a lot of this. We do provide rural areas extensive federal government cost, at public cost. I've personally have been out to many parts of regional and rural New South Wales where it is considered, if you like, a benefit to keep rural communities going by providing an element of telecommunications facilities. That's limited. It is costly. Obviously, the intensity of coverage within urban areas is much greater than rural areas. I cautioned about the 5G, for example, by saying I think it's appropriate that in an area like Burn Mountain that people do have 4G, because 4G allows you to conduct a normal range of facilities. It's not my decision where 5G goes, other than to say all the 5G work we're doing at the moment is in urban areas where the demand is greatest, where the population density is greatest. I think this is an appropriate response to post-COVID reality, where a lot more people are working from home, for example, where this actually allows them to not to conduct all of their economic activities, but to certainly conduct a lot more economic activity from working from home.
Well,
and it is a trade-off, it is a balance. Sorry, did I not get your point? Sorry.
No, you certainly did. And I just wanted you to sort of focus a little bit more. Without this, the new proposal, Bowen Mountain will be left without universal coverage in the Bowen Mountain area.
Yes, yeah, afraid so. Yeah.
And so what you're alluding to, the benefits associated with working from home and also being in a bushfire prone area, the telecommunications would improve in relation to communications during those sort of critical crisis times.
Right, second, sorry, did you finish? Sorry, apologies.
Yes, so
yeah.
Having that telecommunications in place would help during bushfires.
Right, second point first is telecommunications a part of essential infrastructure? That it's not defined as such, but if you look at, for example, rural fire service guidance, yes, the rural fire service look on it as essential infrastructure. That's why when we're locating in areas, bushfire prone areas, we have to go along with the RFS guidance in terms of APZs, in terms of fireproofing material, because if there is a bushfire. Now, I'm not sure whether Bowen Mountain was hit in the last big bushfire. Certainly, as you drive up, if you go up Bellsliner Road to the Blue Mountains, for example, you can still see extensive areas which were devastated in bushfires. This, you're right on that point, the ability to obviously to report a bushfire and save property and help save life is part of essential infrastructure, not defined as such. If that was the point you're making, yes, but there isn't actually a definition anywhere as such. But it's
all right. Well, certainly in relation to the fire, there's certainly ember attacks, and Bowen Mountain is certainly at the forefront of exposure to fire. I want to take you to radiation. One of the issues that have been brought to my attention, both within the reports and generally, is the amount of angst we've heard today associated with potential radiation. And even one of the officers of council talked in terms of the radiation being emitted here is in the shape of a mushroom. I thought it would come out more like a sphere. Now, the concern that I had was the distancing. We've heard today from one of the residents saying the 4.5 metres is more aligned to be 1 metre. And somebody even made reference to you could reach out and touch this tower. A concern that I have is that we just don't have enough actual application of the effects of radiation on this site. We've got lots of policies and lots of guidelines and lots of conditions and matters of speculation, but I'm particularly concerned about the radiation that will be emanating from this site with this proposal to the people who live within 1 metre or thereabouts, within the guidelines talking about what it should be at 50 metres or 100 metres. And as I say, whether it's something that can be given some assurance that this proposal does not cause or create any radiation effects of a material harm, because the speculation and uncertainty simply drives community angst. There needs to be some certainty. I don't get that certainty from this report. And I feel I need some guidance, and you're the expert that's come to us today from the applicant's perspective. What guidance and certainties or assurances can you give that the radiation levels here will be of no material effect to the residents that are within that 1 metre of this proposal? What comfort do we take away from this?
Right, going to just refer you to page 48 of the Officer's Report, Principle 3 Health Standards, of where we begin when we're looking at this issue. So we produce an EME environmental report. That's not an Optus report. It's not a government report. The guidance is actually in ARPANZ, the Australian Radiation Protection Nuclear Safety Agency. So on their website, they provide guidance. Actually, there is a go on their website and actually it talks about EME reports and how they're constructed. It's a model, of course, it's a model. The touching of the tower at the base, that's not part of the consideration of EME. EME is emanating from the antennas, which are at the top of the tower. They do go out in a kind of a mushroom, and there are a number of antennas pointing in different directions. As you get very close to one, I mean, I'm actually trained. I have to have specific training to work to be allowed to go and work on these things. Nobody can go up there normally. There are zones immediately in front of the antennas which nobody can actually get to. And then there are other zones. What happens is, as you move further away, the EME levels decrease. The figure given in the report, the maximum human exposure level is calculated at 1.82. Now, 1.82, where 100 is the safe level. So we're less than 2% of the safest level. I tried to refer, I think I have to refer you, rather than to say Mr. Hull would say that, wouldn't he? He's working for Optus. Can I please refer you once again to our ARPANZ and to, if necessary, the World Health Organization for extensive guidance on that matter. Now,
but
being actually close, yes,
what distance? You're saying that 1.82 is less than 2%.
Yeah, you need
1 metre, 10 metres, 100 metres?
No, it's actually, sorry, I haven't got, I should have got the copy of the report in front of me. Have you got access to the Statement of Environmental Effects? It's an appendix to it. My apology, I'm working from home, I don't have it to hand.
Maybe the council officers might have, but I think what we're looking at is at what distance, where is this safe zone? You say yourself, there's a zone in front of the antenna that nobody goes in front of.
Oh, that's literally in front of it, sir. Sorry, you'd have to be on a ladder at the top of the pole.
That's high.
Yeah.
But there must be some fallout. There must be some saturation point where there's an element of immersion within this saturation point that provides some sort of exposed risk. And I suppose I'm trying to work that out as to where that risk is.
Sorry, my apologies, sir. I am working from home today and I don't have a copy that I would be able to find it if I come out of my computer. Perhaps somebody has a copy of as the manager of strategic planning, got a copy of the report to hand. It is explained in that document, sir, about what these levels are and where safe. Can I say, as far as the guidance is concerned, everywhere is safe. Now, somebody will come back and say, well, in 50 years' time, we might all die of something. Yes, of course, that's the case. We're never going to know that. It was the same with lead in petrol, and it's the same with numerous other things. In terms of existing knowledge and understanding based on large-scale international studies, as found within ARPANZ and the World Health Organization, this proposal is considered to be safe. Now, there's the perceptions of safety are not necessarily something that I could deal with. Of course, they're not. We can only base it on our understanding of present knowledge and understanding. I'm sorry I don't have the figures immediately in front of me, but I hope, sir, if you're referring to that documentation, on rare occasions, if it is considered that there is an element of doubt, we can undertake actual measurements over a period of time. If the panel had doubts about that matter and they wish to put, say, a planning condition that actual measurements need to be undertaken after a period of 3 months or 6 months or something, and if they varied significantly, and I've never come across it myself, I'm trying to give you.
This would be a first, wouldn't it, Mr. Hull?
I mean, these 1.82, to me, this is my job. I do this all day and every day. That's an exceptionally low figure, Within urban areas, that easily could go up to 10, 15, 20%. go down George Street and look at any building and look at the number of antennas on the roofs of the building where we've got apartment buildings nearby, and you would expect to see in an urban area figures 10 times that, which would also be acceptable.
But I take you back to what you said a moment ago. You representing the applicant could and are comfortable with the idea of providing a form of monitoring. Is that like a 6-month period of monitoring?
It would be something. I think what we would do, sir, is if the panel wished to give guidance, whether you are able to formulate the exact words in any planning condition or whatever, but we wouldn't have a problem with that. No, the principle wouldn't be a problem. Can I just say I've never come across it in a development application before, but if you want, it could be a first. Of course, it'd be a first.
And so you would call it what would you call it? A period of monitoring?
Yeah, post-construction monitoring. So what we would do is these obviously, until it's built, you don't know the actual levels. So these are only, they're only a calculation.
And what would you do that for? 6 months, 12 months?
I would have thought as soon as it's built and working, on day one, literally, the actual levels would be known. So it could be done quite quickly. That's not going to change over time very much. It does change slightly with the intensity of use. So when nobody's using their mobile phones, it's like mobile phones are pulling on the signal, if you like.
Or could we say 6 months?
Yeah, 6 months. Yeah,
Why don't we say
6 months.
That would give a cycle.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never come. Doesn't mean there's never been a planning condition to that effect. I'm not a planning lawyer, and I don't know if challenged whether such a condition would be robust. But I could certainly go back to Optus. I don't think they'd have a problem in principle.
Well, if the applicant is comfortable with it, and Optus certainly needs, dare I say, with no disrespect, Optus needs to enhance its public image in many ways. I'm sure such a condition would be well received. All right, Mr.
I've no problem with that, sir. No problem.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Chair. Nothing further.
Thanks, Mr. Rogers. Just in relation to the question about proximity and the impacts and what the magic number is, I'm not sure whether council staff have that report, but I have looked at that, and my understanding is within something like 0 to 50 metres, the percentage actually reduces to something like 0.94%. But if the council staff happen to have that whilst we're still in public meeting, then I might.
Could I just add something on that, sir? Sorry, that was the point I was trying to make. It's actually the closer to it, the closer you are to it, it's the lowest figure. The safest place to be is right at the base of the tower. Then there are, as you go out, it goes 0 to 50. That's because the antennas are at the top of the antenna of the tower, not at the bottom. But you have the report. I mean, apologies, I don't have it in front of me, but the guidance and how this is done is laid down within our Panzer. And I'd refer you, please, sir, to the Panzer guidance on how EMA reports work. Look, I'm a town planner. I'm not an expert on this particular subject. There are many others who've written extensively on that matter, who know better than I.
Thank you. So just for, I know it is in the report, but the community hasn't necessarily seen that report. So if the council staff do happen to have that table, refers to the figure as it relates to, I think, 0 to 50 metres distance. Mr. Kane?
Yes, I can confirm the figures provided for 0 to 50 are 0.94. It then between 50 and 100 is 0.54. At its highest at 1.82, it's between 100 and 200 metres. Then at 200 to 300, it's 1.53. 300 to 400, 0.7, and then tapers off at 400 to 500 at 0.39.
Sorry, sir, if I can just add to that, I think that clarifies the point where the 1.82 is the maximum, and that's between 100 and 200 metres. So the closer ones are lower, and as you go further away, it's lower. That's what the report identifies. So the people who live very close to it are actually their levels are much lower.
Thank you.
I would, sorry, I don't want to dwell on the point, but the 1.82, please consider that in terms of what's an acceptable standard. An acceptable standard is much, much higher than 1.82.
Understood. I just have a couple of questions. The distance of 4.5, which has been disputed, but let's say generously less than 5 metres from a residential dwelling. Is that usual? How often would you see a tower that close to a residential dwelling?
I off the top of my head, I couldn't answer you. It's unusual for a greenfield brand new. We will very rarely do it. Going back to the telecommunications guidance, while we're moving the pole slightly, and I'll have to come back again, when you do your site visit, you'll appreciate how close the existing tower is to a residential property. It's very close. Effectively, whilst we're moving it slightly, we're swapping out an existing tower. Now, whether that existing tower is a telecommunications tower or an EE tower or any other sort of tower is, with respect, I would say that's academic, because what you're being asked to consider is the visual impact of the new development. If we can kind of take away, look at concrete tower as one thing, visual impact, and where you are in terms of vis-a-vis the existing tower and any additional visual impact, the telecommunications facility is something on the top of the tower. Now, if you're looking at the base of the tower, you're going to see a concrete pole, whether it's an existing concrete pole or a new concrete pole. So the telecommunications facility at the top of the tower, look at the existing top of the tower, and there's a lot of EE infrastructure at the top of the tower. It's a communications tower, yes. If there were nothing there and this was a green field and we were considered it in terms of a brand new development, where was nothing there at all, that is very unusual. Of course it's unusual, and we wouldn't be there. We wouldn't even attempt to be there. We wouldn't expect to be there. So on this occasion, what you're being asked to consider is compare the visual impact of the existing EE tower with the new, one point, of course, this is a combined facility with new EE facilities, which need to be improved and upgraded in any event. Now, I'm not an expert on the Electricity Act, but I think they would probably be able to do quite a lot of improvement and upgrade work without the need consent anyway. It's not I'm a telecommunications man. I don't do electricity. Sorry, I hope I've answered your question. If not, please.
That's fine. Thank you. Just one last question from me. I mean, this is obviously there with a view to providing some benefit to the local community. But you've heard clearly there's some disquiet as well. Was there any consultation undertaken by Optus in relation to, or prior to this, to gauge public considerations into this?
Yes, there was indeed. Thank you for reminding me, actually, I'd forgotten. We're not required under the EPN Act to undertake additional consultation over and above that undertaken by council in their normal planning processes. Who council consult, where they consult, when they consult is not our business. That's their matter. And however, on this occasion, we undertook, I actually hand delivered all the letters myself, so I remember. We looked carefully at the area, and rather than taking an arbitrary line on the plan, I walked around the area and tried to anticipate which of those residents would perceive they would be impacted by the proposal. And we sent them an additional leaflet with details. Now, that's a long time ago. My recollection is we only had 1 or 2 responses. Now, whether that was the same area that council ultimately consulted on, I can't help you. Council would be able to advise you on that matter. So this is over and above. We've gone over and above the normal consultation process, yes.
Any other questions from panelists? And council staff, were there any issues you wish to raise before close this session?
No, nothing further. No.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Hull. I appreciate that. So that's the end of the public questions component of this item. Mentioned previously the end of this. There's one more item that we'll be considering public representations on. At the end of that, I'll be adjourning the meeting to go into closed session for the panel to deliberate on these items, and then we'll be coming back into our open session to and either anyone in the public is able to listen into that online, or within the week there'll be the decision on the council's website. So I thank everyone who's provided a presentation today for your time. Appreciate that. And so I'll be, this item is now at an end, and I'll be proceeding into the final item on the council's agenda. Just leave time for those who wish to depart to do so.
Can I just say thank you, sir. If there are any other matters you don't feel adequately covered, I'm quite happy to provide further written submissions on those points if it assists you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll now proceed to the third item, which is item 13 on the agenda. This is DA 0239/21, 87 Bells Liner Road, Currajong. I only have one registered speaker, no speakers against the recommendation. I have Mr. Canon Cuneo speaking for the item. Mr. Cuneo, I can see you're online. Could you announce yourself and who you are and who you're representing? As the only speaker here, then I won't impose a 3-minute limit, but if you could just provide us with whatever information you'd like to provide us with, and then there may be questions from the panel.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so good morning, everyone. The council and panel, thank you for providing the opportunity to speak to this matter. My name is Canon Cuneo, and I'm an associate planner here at Mecone, and we're acting on behalf of the owner of the site. So Mecone has been engaged by the proponent to review the proposed development and the documentation submitted as part of the application to council. We've reviewed the documentation submitted and council's assessment report prepared for the panel meeting. And whilst we agree that there are some concerns that require addressing, we're seeking deferral of the determination of this application to address some of those concerns. So based on our review of council's report, we've found that there are, I guess, 3 main concerns raised by council through council's assessment. The first being probably the most prevalent is in relation to servicing of the site, and in particular wastewater. The second being height, and the third being traffic and parking. So I'll just address each of those separately quickly. So in relation to the servicing of the site, we've had discussions with the court, we've coordinated with the wastewater consultant on the proposed development, who's confirmed that the concerns raised can be addressed by way of an amended design, which includes a slight redesign of the the wastewater location, the storage location. It can be within or below the building. So the current design requires the site to be serviced twice a week, which has been raised as a concern by council. However, the wastewater consultant has confirmed that an increase in the storage capacity will allow for a reduction in the number of times that the site would be required to service. This could be undertaken potentially on a weekly basis, so rather than twice a week. And we would request that a time window be provided, or that a time window be allowed for, so that a cartage truck can service the site a number of times to be able to service the site and the development. So in relation to servicing and wastewater, we believe that this can be addressed, and with revisions to the plans and additional information to be provided by our wastewater consultant, we can address that issue that has been raised by council in their report. So the second concern relating to height, I believe that this has been addressed in the amended plans. It appears that there's some clarification required The plans that are provided, and in particular the reference to section B to B in Council's assessment report, the height breach actually relates to a component that's in the background of the section plan. It doesn't actually relate to the section. So I draw your attention to, I'm not sure if you've got the plans available in front of you now, but there's a plan that has a height blanket, which is towards the back of the package, and it actually shows the height breach only relates to a balustrade on the upper terrace. So all areas covered by red are below the 10-metre height limit, and that balustrade on the top level there, you can see that there's a slight breach in the height limit, which I guess I'll get to in the next point, but that will be rectified through an amendment to the design. So in terms of height, we believe that that's been addressed, and with an amended design, the height breach will be removed completely. And so the third and final issue being the traffic and parking can also be addressed by way of amended plans. So we've had discussions with the proponent and they confirm that they're accepting of an amendment to the design, which will significantly reduce the terraces and balconies. So I had a discussion with council, the assessing officer, earlier this week about some of the concerns, and one of them was mainly that the outdoor areas and the terrace areas were quite significant, and they were included in the calculation of the parking areas. So by us removing those or reducing them to a point that would be considered acceptable, we believe that we can address the main concern being that there was insufficient parking provided for the development. So that covers the three main issues, and as mentioned, we believe that the concerns raised by council can be addressed by way of amendment to the proposal, again, which the proponents confirmed they're willing to do, and we're requesting that the determination be deferred to allow us time to be able to make those necessary changes and submit the additional information that council requires to end up being supportive of the development.
Mr. Kenny, if that were to be deferred, what time frame? So we're under pressure to get applications through the system as quickly as possible. What time frame is required for that?
Absolutely. I haven't exactly confirmed timeframes with the proponent. However, I believe that a couple of weeks would be needed. They are able to make the amendments to the plans in-house. I think it'd be more so, judging by the information that council's requested or mentioned as inadequate information as part of their report to the panel, we would need to engage a civil engineer to be able to provide some plans in relation to excavation and those sorts of things, stormwater design, and some road reconstruction associated with the, I think it's Timms Hill Road. So it just depends on the timeframes that they would need to be able to prepare those plans and then get them back to council for referral to the relevant departments within council for assessment.
Knowing how busy everyone is in the industry at the moment, a couple of weeks would be highly optimistic. But, okay, understood. Thank you for that. Open up to questions from the panel. Ms. Kincaid.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Kuno.
Sorry, that was Elizabeth I was speaking to. But I think
that's okay. I don't have any questions at this point. I'm happy for Paul to kick off.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Kuno, how long has it been since you've had notice from council as to the recommendation of refusal? Hours, days, weeks, months?
I was advised late last week.
You were? And
yes.
So this, as the representative of the proponent, so you're advised a week out?
Correct.
And have you communicated to council your intention to make this variation of seeking an adjournment today, or is this the first that council has been heard of this?
No, so as mentioned previously, I discussed with the assessing officer of the application just to seek out whether there would be whether there's opportunity for us to be able to address the concerns raised by council. And I believe that there is. Council's officer seems forthcoming in providing some information that we are able to fix these sorts of issues that have primarily been raised through the assessment of the application. And And we're happy to work with council to be able to get to this to a point where council can support the proposal.
Mm-hmm. And what do you say about the suggestion and consideration that this is an overdevelopment of the site? Do you think that is a fair assessment, or do you think that's an unfair assessment? And do you think these proposed variation of plans, etc., will address that suggestion?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't like to use the term overdevelopment of the site. I think that there's ways of mitigating and managing the actual design to make it of an appropriate scale to meet the objectives of the zone. Being a rural sort of area, Kurrajong is, I think the development needs to sort of fit in with the existing character while also providing opportunity for expansion and economic development, particularly in these areas. So I think that definitely with the amended plans, we can definitely address those concerns raised, both through submissions and council's assessment, and provide a development that is more palatable to the community and to council.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, are you familiar with the term stalking horse?
No.
Well, a stalking horse is a personal thing that is used to conceal someone's real intentions. And it's been suggested to me that this application is a stalking horse, being an overdevelopment, that is effectively a guise for a further application down the track when you take into account the 2 substantial restaurants and the various other business entities here, that a proposal or an amended proposal could be made for a licensed premises, a hotel, a pub in the future. And so that's the stalking horse, that here we have a commercial proposal, and that in effect, the true reason behind this is for something else at a later point in time. And that is, from a community perspective, a community concern. Have you heard that?
I haven't. Both the phrase or the intention of this being a hotel, there's been no discussion about that whatsoever. And I don't believe that there would be a hotel on this site. I don't think that the site would be entirely suitable for that sort of use. And whether it's come about as part of a submission or community discussions where they think that that sort of thing is going to happen. To my knowledge, there is absolutely no intention for it to be used as a hotel, and that's all I can say on that.
But I think, and I appreciate that clarity. I appreciate that clarity. Appreciate that clarity. Yes, Chair.
If I could just say that I understand where the question is coming from when you're expressing what you have heard.
No, I'm satisfied now. Mr. Kuno has clarified that.
Those won't be considerations for our determination today.
Yes. Thank you.
So continue, Mr. Rogers, if you have any other questions.
No, none at this stage. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
My questions were around the height in particular, and the submission has answered those questions that I had raised myself about how it was shown, how the heights were shown as background. Yeah, so I'm good now. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe it's a drafting area where it's showing that it appears as like an 11-metre high building, but there's only that balustrade. So by us reducing that, it would address that. Yeah.
I spotted all that last night. Thank you.
Great.
Mr. Kino, can I just confirm, did you say that were you involved in the submission of this application as town planners, or have you been brought in more recently to provide advice?
That's correct. Yeah. So I wasn't involved in the submission of the application or the preparation of the additional information. Mecone has been engaged later in the process, more so as part of this a review of council's recommendation. So we've met with the proponent and sort of discussed the opportunities for amendments to the design. They're seeking to want to get this development to a point of recommendation for approval, in which case Mecone is of the same opinion, but we did advise them that there would be some amendments required, and some more additional information submitted to council to be able to satisfy the concerns raised in the report. So yeah, Mecone has been engaged later in the process. We weren't involved early.
So just to clarify then the question that Mr. Rogers raised initially, that it is probably the case that the applicant was aware of these concerns before last week. It's just that you've only been engaged recently to assist the applicant.
Yeah, that's correct. So I'm looking at a strategy moving forward rather than the issues that have been raised today. But I can appreciate that it's the panel's responsibility to consider all those matters. But yeah, my purpose of being here is to seek deferral of the determination to allow those things to be addressed, which the proponent is definitely happy to do.
Okay, thank you.
I found it on the web.
Sure what that was. Council staff, I won't get you to advise on the question of deferral or otherwise, but are there any points that you want to raise?
No, nothing at this stage, no.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thanks, Mr. Kenny. I appreciate your time. The panel, as you probably heard at the end of the last item, panel will deliberate now. I'll be adjourning the meeting to deliberate, and we'll then open up again to confirm our decisions. And you're welcome to tune in on that, or the minutes will be available within the week. So thank you again for your time. And
thank you all.
I will now close the public part of this meeting. It's 12:34. Panelists, we will, I think we're...
Sorry, Chair, we're closing the live stream shortly. Yeah.
So I'll wait for that to occur. Assume that's closed now, is it?
Not just yet, no.
Okay. If you could just let me know. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hereby reopen the public meeting for the Hawkesbury Local Planning Panel, the 20th of October 2022. The panel has deliberated on the three items before us on today's agenda and has made the following determinations. I'll read from the panel minutes. In relation to the first item, which is item 11, 95 Old Pitt Town Road, Pitt Town. The panel has unanimously approved the application subject to the following, to the recommended conditions, with the addition of the following points to be added to condition 52. The complaints register is to be maintained. The register is to include all complaints, both verbal and written, on all issues in addition to noise, and all responses and mitigation actions are to be recorded in the register. The register is to be made available to council at any time on request. The permanent sign should be placed in a location outside the place of worship that is visible from the public domain, providing 24-hour contact details in the case of complaints. Number 2, add a condition to ensure swimming pool fencing is provided in accordance with relevant standards. And number 3, include an additional clause in condition 30 that requires the walls of the Assembly Hall to have a minimum acoustic performance of RW26. In relation to the reasons for this decision, the panel has considered the assessment report, the submissions and the representations made during public address, including issues of amenity, noise and traffic, and that there are conditions in place to manage and minimise these impacts. The use is permitted in the zone, and the limited scale and intensity of the use is considered to be compatible within the rural environment. The proposal is utilising part of the site, which minimises the scale and intensity of the proposed development. Item 2, which was number 12, 18 Lieutenant Bowen Road, Bowen Mountain. The panel unanimously approved the application subject to the recommended conditions with the addition of the following conditions. The applicant undertakes regular monitoring of post-construction radio frequency, RF, and electromagnetic energy, EME, around the telecommunications facility for a period of 6 months and makes this available to council and made publicly available. 2, the submission of a construction management plan to council to ensure no removal of trees as part of the development. The reasons for this decision are that the panel has considered the public interest. The proposed facility will provide improved mobile phone coverage to the locality and will provide a service that is needed for the Bowen Mountain locality and its surrounds. The development would have a positive social and economic impact to the locality as it is integral to the provision of quality telecommunications infrastructure and will provide for improved telecommunication connections for businesses and community, or in the event of a natural disaster or emergency. The application is considered to be in the public interest by providing improved telecommunication services and the ability to interconnect remote residential areas. The matters raised in public submissions and representations at the panel meeting have been assessed in detail. The panel considers that these concerns have been adequately addressed in the council report and through the imposition of conditions. In response to the community concerns, the panel acknowledges the applicant's acceptance of the condition to monitor levels of radio frequency, RF, electromagnetic energy, EME, around the proposed facility for a period of 6 months following its construction, and to make this available to the council and the public. In relation to item 13, 87 Bells Line of Road, Curragong. The panel unanimously refused the application for the recommended reasons for refusal contained within the council's assessment report, with the addition of the following reasons. The design of the facade, including the interface between Tinshill Road and adjoining properties, is not compatible with the locality, and they will have a significant negative impact on the amenity of adjoining and surrounding properties. 2, the size and location of the outdoor terraced areas will have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the surrounding locality. And those are all of the items considered by the panel today. And with that, I will close the public meeting at 3:54, and I'd like to thank all the panelists and the council representatives and everyone else who participated in the meeting for their participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.